Brian's joining me again to walk through the third module in the Life After Pornography program. And this is one of my favorite concepts in acceptance and commitment therapy, and that's the idea of willingness. Willingness really is the key to help us navigate many of the concerns that we struggle with in life, not only with compulsive behaviors, but things like anxiety and depression as well. So I hope you enjoy this chat about willingness and our walkthrough of the third module of the Life After Pornography program.
If you're like me, you know your mind can be your best or your worst friend. Our mind is an amazing tool that can do incredible things, but our mind can also create problems out of nowhere. Sometimes our mind keeps recommending the same solutions to problems even when they aren't working. I see this pattern play out as individuals try to overcome their anxiety, depression, or even struggles with pornography, using approaches that make sense but aren't very helpful. This podcast will show you how real researchers and clinicians are changing the way we approach mental health and reveal helpful research-supported principles designed to help real people with real problems. My name is Dr. Cameron Staley, and welcome to the Life After Series Radio.
So I'm back with Brian, and we're going to continue our walkthrough journey of the Life After Pornography program, and we're all the way to Module 3. I can't keep saying like, oh, this module's my favorite, because it can't be true, but this module's my favorite. And that'll be true until maybe we talk about the next module. But I love this idea of willingness. And I don't think I'd ever heard about willingness before I learned about acceptance and commitment therapy. I didn't even know it was an option, didn't even know it was a thing, was not on my radar. And I really do credit ACT with helping me see how willingness may be the key to engaging in the things that I really care about in life, and how I can navigate the things that are uncomfortable that I don't really care about in a more successful way.
Absolutely. I'm on the same boat. I think once you understand that willingness is kind of your place to make the choice. I feel like there are things that can't be controlled, and everyone who's signed up for this program, odds are they've been trying to control something they can't control. But willingness is focused on things that you can control. It's the choice you have to navigate that space. And I very much appreciated learning that too, because it just makes so much more sense, controlling the things you can control, and then willingly accepting and understanding the things that you can't.
That's what it's all about. And so I'm glad you throw in the term acceptance. That's the acceptance part of acceptance and commitment therapy. And willingness is kind of what we mean by acceptance. And sometimes I like the word willingness more than acceptance, because sometimes it's like, wait, you want me to accept this problem or this struggle? And it's like, that's not quite what we mean, but it's more being willing to experience some things. And so you're right, that often people that are struggling with compulsive behaviors, they've been trying to control something that's not controllable. And often, like around pornography, it's, I want to control a sexual urge. And we've been fighting and struggling all our might to control that. But it can't work. Like, we can't control an urge, a thought, or emotion. The more we try to control it, the harder it becomes. But willingness, like you said, this is the exciting part. Willingness is within our control. Willingness is a choice. It is an attitude. It is a skill that we can practice. And we can grow this willingness ability, which really is a game changer.
Yeah, and I've already got so many questions. I just kind of reviewed the module before, and then went through the information, and I had a lot of, I don't know, new insights, I guess you could say. The first one being, trying to articulate this. As we talk about like your mind, the plumber, that specific subtopic under module 3, you learn more about the problem solving mind. And I always think of like the definition of insanity, when
Mm.
it's like trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And I feel like that the video and then the analogy kind of makes me think like, how long have I been doing the same exact thing and seen nothing happen? And the question comes to my mind, is there a part of willingness that's like almost inverted, where it's you're willingly accepting that maybe your prior attempts at controlling this thing didn't work, and this willingness to say, okay, let's be mindful, let's take a step back. I mean, I guess that's just the definition of willingness in itself, but like almost this like pre-willingness to willingness. I'm already confusing people right off the bat, but
No, I like that thought. I don't know if I've ever thought about it in that way, that you're right. We're on this autopilot where we got this problem, this compulsive behavior, viewing porn, and we keep trying the same method to solve it. And you're right, it's not working. And then people develop this belief that, well, it's never going to get any better. I've been working for decades of my life and it's still here. This must be a really impossible addiction. But we never really step back and like look at, well, maybe it's how we're approaching it is the problem. Maybe it's not these sexual images have so much power, I'm powerless. Maybe it's how I'm trying to fix this is the problem. And I love that plumber analogy where if you got a leaky basement and you call the plumber and he's telling you he's going to fix it and it still leaks, how many times are you going to keep calling that plumber? And we do the same thing with our mind. It's like, well, we're going to keep going there. We're going to keep asking our mind to solve it. And I think I like where you're going there, where I don't know, it almost sounds like a little bit of humility, where it's like, maybe I need to step back and recognize that my brilliant brain and mind hasn't figured this one out. And maybe I need to be open to another way. And that might be a willingness, but it's almost like this personal humility where I don't think I've got the answer to this one. I might need to try something different. And I think it is, I don't, almost swallowing our pride a little bit because our mind's like, no, I got it. Like, give me a little bit more time on this problem. It's like, I've given you years and decades and it's still here. But being able to try something else out, I think you're right. That is an act of willingness. I want to try something else out.
pride was definitely one of my questions on here because I think there is a little bit of overlap in the willingness sphere, where pride can really kind of mess things up. Um, and I know personally, I mean, it's talked about in the prior two modules that like you're working hard on this. You've dug your way to China by this point. Like it's not about working hard. It's you I think you're absolutely right. It's this willingness to admit that okay, this definitely isn't working. And I just love the language of willingness, that like willingness is a active, that sounds like a just a complete contradiction, but it's an active word, but it's kind of passive in terms of like humility.
Yeah.
Like you're actively accepting something, but you're passively saying, okay, I need help. This is not like, there needs to be some space here.
Yeah. What an
That's just
interesting combination where it's like I'm actively choosing to allow some things to be here. And for me, I think about willingness, its opposite is willfulness. And so
mm,
willfulness is trying to impose your view, your agenda, your approach. You're going to make it happen. You're going to be willful. If there's a barrier, you're going to push through it. If there's a problem, you're going to conquer it. And that's, I think, most of us would prefer to maybe approach our struggles or our environment in that way. Like, if I want to build a house, I'm just going to bulldoze what's there and build what I want. Instead of like, oh, wait, like there's a hill here and a little stream and some trees. How could I build it a way that's in harmony with the environment in that situation, that context. And in a way, that's going to be a lot less work and probably a lot less expensive. And you're probably going to be living in your house a lot sooner. But I think in our mind, it's like we can do anything. We just got to change everything around us and then we're good to go. That's willfulness, is like forcing things to happen. And I think we're set up for that because we're on the top of the food chain. Like we can pretty much make whatever we want happen. But there's other times where there's things within us and things without us that are bigger than us. And I think about, we've got amazing technologies and societies, and yet we still can't stop a tsunami. We don't stop hurricanes. We don't stop tornadoes. There's still forest fires. There's just things that are bigger than us. And I think willingness is the approach for those things where at times there's emotions that feel very overwhelming. And there's urges that are really quite powerful and quite innate. And trying to bulldoze those, it's like trying to bulldoze a tsunami. It's like it's just not gonna work. The tsunami's gonna win every time. It's bigger than a bulldozer. And so willfulness, I think, works with some problems, but when it comes to things like urges and emotions, we need a different approach. And it's willingness. And I think about, imagine the tsunami coming to land. I mean, it can be pretty big, pretty devastating. And then it kind of recedes again. And like the land's still there. Like the stuff that we built is not there because that's pretty temporary. But like the earth is there, the beach is still there, like the rocks are still there. And for me, that's willingness. Like if we're willing to experience discomfort and the waves and the sunshine and the storms, it allows us to exist and to be present in those experiences. But if we build this wall believing we can keep out something like a tsunami, I mean, the wall's going to get pummeled, or, maybe the wall exists, but now all the water's stuck behind it. And that water's going to be nasty after a while and toxic. And now you got another problem to solve. It's like, I stopped the wall or the water, but now I'm trapped in it. But willingness allows the water to come to shore and allows it to go out again. It's really embracing that we're going to have thoughts and emotions and urges, and they may be uncomfortable, but being able to kind of stretch your arms out and say, I'm going to experience this, really allows us to be grounded and not taken out to sea.
So many thoughts. I'm impressed with, I've never heard these analogies before, but they're all blending together. I thought of like that first one, if you're building your house and you just kind of bulldoze everything, when that tsunami comes, you're gonna be really sad that you bulldozed the hill that like would have kept you safe from the water, like, and then building that wall and it traps all the water in. Like willingness just allows for the coming and going. Like I think willfulness is the quickest way to get stuck when you're trying to impose your will on things that are not meant to be willed.
And I've learned that lesson over and over as a parent, where it's like using willfulness to convince your kids they need to eat that dinner. It doesn't work. And I have to relearn that lesson like several times a week. I'm still learning that lesson. But we got this little human that's new to the world and new to eating and figuring out their preferences and their opinions, and trying to control these little humans is willfulness, and it's ineffective parenting. And instead, there can be a more willing approach to parenting where I'm actually creating space for these little humans to unfold. And they might throw some tantrums that are quite uncomfortable for me, especially when they do it in a public setting. And I feel like everyone's judging me, like, what a horrible parent you are, and what a nasty little kid you got. And for me, being willing to experience those emotions and those fears and those judgments and allow my little kid to be a little human. And sometimes if they don't get what they want right away, they're going to kind of melt down. And that's okay. And it's okay in the middle of a grocery store to have a meltdown. But often as parents, we're like, I'm not willing to experience any of that discomfort or perceived judgment. So I'm going to yell at my kid or tell them to be quiet. That's willfulness. It really doesn't improve our relationship. It doesn't help this little human develop. And so a lot of parenting requires willingness to allow some things to occur and for you to feel some things and to get more comfortable with that. And as we do that, I think we enjoy our kids more, we enjoy parenting more, we enjoy learning and growing. But often that discomfort with anxiety and pressure and judgment, it turns our willingness off. And then we willfully try to impose our will, and it just doesn't work, especially when you're in other relationships or other relationships with our own emotions. The bulldozer technique just doesn't work.
I'm curious why. I know personally I don't find willfulness like an attractive trait, but I know there's a percentage of the population that does. It's like that controlling, like dictator, totalitarianistic mindset that some people find attractive. Is that like an agency thing? Like, oh, if they're making the decision for me, I don't have to make it. Um, but like me personally, I hate being willed to do things. Like,
Yeah.
please do not like tell me what to do. And I don't know. There's like this dangerous space of it seems like there is a big part of the population that's like, no, like willfulness. Let's impose our will versus willingness. And this might get, I'm not trying to get political or anything, but I'm just like the behavioral side of that. I'm curious what that means.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I have all the answers or I'm smart enough for some of your questions, but I think my reactions are I find willfulness, you're right, I don't find it attractive in a quality in others, but the idea of being able to control my environment is attractive. It's like, okay, if I want this house, I can achieve it. If I want my kids to behave a certain way, I can accomplish it. Like willfulness is saying you can have control in your environment, in your relationships, with your emotions, your thoughts, and your urges, and you can have control now. So I think that concept is quite attractive, quite appealing. And yet when I experience political leaders or people in my life that are trying to control me, I find it quite repulsive. And it's like, I'm actually not going to vote for you because I don't enjoy this process. I like choosing to engage and have a little bit more flexibility. And yet then we turn around and try to willfully live our own life, knowing that it doesn't work and it's probably not that attractive. But I think it's this, our mind convinces us like we could have it. We can control urges now. You just need to work harder. You need to have more willpower, more self-control. And often I hear those words with folks struggling with porn. It's like, I just need to have more self-control. This is all a willpower thing. And it's like, no, that's the treadmill approach. Like you could run on that for the rest of your life. It's not going to get you where you want to go. But stepping off that treadmill would be like, wait, you actually want me to experience a sexual urge without struggling with it or pushing it away or judging it as bad? I just have to experience it without getting rid of it or speeding through it? Or when I'm anxious or uncomfortable, you don't want me to distract myself or scroll through social media? You want me to feel those things? And it's like, yeah, that's willingness. And that's really how we get our control back, is being willing to experience those things and growing that capacity. That for me is a way more enduring, attractive trait than willfulness.
That I don't know why you were worried about answering that question. That seemed to do the trick. I totally agree with that though. I don't know what human in us, I guess it might be the top of the food chain principle that we're used to. It's like a very primal instinct, like I'm hungry, I'm gonna go kill something and eat it. Like it's a control. Um but in terms of dealing with struggles, I can't think of a more exhausting approach than willfulness.
Yeah.
And speaking from experience after 10 years on the treadmill, like you're gonna get you're gonna get tired.
Yeah.
but being willing to have willingness and accept, and understand and choose. That's the better approach. That's like true freedom in my book.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable. And so in this module,
Yes.
there's a couple activities to practice willingness, where there's a staring contest.
Ooh,
I have
oof.
people write a word on a paper and tear it up and struggle with it versus holding it in their hand and creating space for it. And then there's even an extra workshop in LAP that are just dozens and dozens of willingness opportunities. And I think about, often we're so focused, like with the porn struggle, it's like, well, I got to get more comfortable around sexual urges. Willingness is so much bigger than that, that you can practice willingness in so many areas of your life. And that will generalize to willingness to experience a sexual urge without needing to get rid of it by looking at porn and masturbating. That you can experience that urge without needing to change it. And it can be as simple as calling somebody on the telephone, or it's like, we don't do that anymore. We're going to send a message, we're going to send a text. It's uncomfortable. It's like, yep, make a phone call. Or go to a restaurant and ask for something that's not on the menu. Go up to a stranger, ask for some pocket change. Go to a cafeteria and sit alone. Notice all those eyes staring at you. Or pop a piece of chocolate in your mouth and don't chew on it. Just notice the sensations and those urges to chew. Or feel your phone vibrate or a little notification and don't check your phone. Like, just be willing to experience these sensations, these urges, these thoughts, these emotions. And really, willingness is a lot about practicing getting more comfortable with discomfort. And as we do that, that's how we really unlock our ability to choose our behavior. And the problem has been is we've been so focused on trying to control an urge that we don't have any energy left for our behaviors and actions. But if we allow those urges to be there, we actually have a lot more ability to dictate our decisions and our behavior. And it's letting go of controlling this discomfort. We can make choices that are going to be more consistent with our values. And it really all starts with willingness. So if you want to change your behavior and not look at porn anymore, it really starts with, we got to get more comfortable feeling things that are uncomfortable.
Amen. Amen. I remember I just redid the staring contest, and I don't know how many times I would have to do that to get it like very comfortable, but that's a unique one. But I do love it for its, like, the purpose it's designed for. It's just naturally somewhat uncomfortable, but then I feel like after a specific point in time, your mind just, like, your perspective flips, and now you're accepting, and you're like, okay, this is past social and acceptance, and now we're like here. Now we're actually here. It's real and vulnerable. I might actually, I think it'd be fun to do this in person. I might just ask someone to have a staring contest for 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I love this. That's probably one of my favorite willingness exercises. It works so well. I remember I taught a class of undergraduates. They were seniors. They were all interested in being counselors or social workers or psychologists. And so I had a class of maybe a dozen folks. And I said, hey, we're going to practice this. Oh, my goodness. I'm like, hey, pair up, scoot your chairs closer together. This was all pre-COVID, so distancing wasn't a concern.
Right.
And there we are. And it's like, okay, what I want you to do is look your partner in the eyes. We're going to do this for 5 minutes. There's no talking. And you're going to notice discomfort, and you'll notice urges to laugh or to look away or to think of something different. I want you to notice that. And you can just hear the nervous chatter. And it's like, oh my gosh. And then we say, okay, let's go. And you'll hear the snickers and the giggles and the looking away and clearing our throat and like, oh, it's uncomfortable, all the commentary. And like, that's all really normal and natural when you're invited to make eye contact with another human. And then within a couple of minutes, that kind of settles down. And what you discover is there's another person with a whole lifetime of experiences, with drive and value and goodness. And I've discovered that right on the other side of discomfort can be profound connection and profound experiences. And it's like, are we willing to experience discomfort for a few seconds or a minute or two if the payoff is to truly connect with another human or to truly engage in something we really care about? And that's what I've seen with willingness. It's momentary discomfort for this reward that's incredible. So then I'll process that experience like I did with this class, like, how was that? And they're like, oh, it was so hard. But then after I got over myself and my own discomfort and how am I looking or where should I make eye contact, like you said, there's a switch that gets flipped. And I am now interested and curious about the person sitting across from me. It's no longer about my own discomfort. And this just whole world opens up. And I remember in this class, we did it at the beginning of the semester when they didn't know each other well. And at the end of the semester, they said, we want to do that again. And we did the staring contest again. And this time it was profound. And people were like in tears, where it's like, I connected with people that are my friends now. And it wasn't about, that was so the worst 5 minutes of my life, so uncomfortable. It was like, that was one of the most connected experiences I've ever had. And all it took was willingness to sit with something that's pretty uncomfortable, but also is pretty temporary. Like looking at someone for 5 minutes, it feels like a really long time, but the discomfort's fairly short. And then, oh man, beyond that, it's connection. I don't know, even talking about it, it brings back those memories of, it's exhilarating to be like, I was able to overcome discomfort, sit with it long enough to truly connect with somebody and to have that person connect with me in a way that we typically don't take the time to because it's uncomfortable.
Especially with vulnerability too. You think of that as a price of discomfort or just being willing to share your story. But thinking of the return on that investment, right? Like you said, once you breach that discomfort on the other side, it's this connection that's beautiful. And now there's so much more depth to it because you've been uncomfortable together. It seems like it only just adds to your relationship.
Yep.
And that's such a powerful principle. And I think that if everyone understood that, there'd be a lot less problems happening.
Yep. You're right. And that's really what's underlying pornography concerns, unwanted porn viewing, is it's a lack of willingness. Where it's like we feel a sexual urge and it's like, oh, I'm uncomfortable feeling that way. It's bringing up shame. It's bringing up fear. It's bringing up judgment. So I want to get rid of that sexual urge as fast as I possibly can. And so what people tend to do is they look at porn to ramp up that feeling and then masturbate as quick as you can to get over it. That's the pattern. But that it's not inevitable. Like the alternative is like, wow, I'm a sexual being. I might be feeling turned on. This is an urge. What does this feel like? What do I notice in my body? What sensations? What thoughts? What emotion? What does sexual arousal feel like? And you can sit in that experience. And the amazing thing is sexual arousal ebbs and flows just like breathing. But there's this fear that it's just going to get harder and I won't be able to control it. So I got to do something right now to get rid of it. But it's just like breathing. Like sometimes we're aroused and sometimes we're not. And if we allow it to naturally breathe, sometimes it's high and then it's low. And it can be high and low without needing to change it by looking at porn or masturbating to get rid of it. We can just experience it as part of living, that we felt a sexual urge, we felt desire, we felt arousal. Those are pretty normal, natural things. We can experience them. We don't need to get rid of them.
So I've got another question. And it's more about like willingness is a function of your mind because I heard an acronym the other day of like HALT, the hungry, angry, lonely, tired
Oh,
when you're in that headspace. And I think, at least for me personally, I do notice, I mean, if I'm hungry, I feel like all the demons come out, like if I want a sandwich, like everyone knows, right? Um, but being able to be willing in those circumstances, is that just a development of the skill? I mean, because clearly, if willingness is a function of your mind and you don't have enough energy to fuel that, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to be willing.
absolutely. And I'm glad you bring this up. So, halt. So it was hungry,
Angry,
angry,
lonely,
lonely,
tired.
and tired. Yeah. So in those states, being willing to experience discomfort is much more difficult. It's going to be more challenging. So if we are well rested, we are well nourished, it's going to be a lot easier to be willing to experience an emotion or an urge. But I would say, even if we are tired or um, lonely, willingness is still a choice. It's still possible, it's still an attitude. So it's been a while since I've watched this show, but there was a show, I can't remember what station, but it was this show where they sent two people out into the wilderness. They didn't have any clothes on, they didn't have any food. And it's like, you got to survive for like 3 weeks. And you're out in the Alaskan wilderness or somewhere in Africa. And it's like, I think they called it Naked and Afraid. And it's like, wow, like you have to find your food, you have to build your shelter, you don't even have protection from the elements, there's no clothes. And yet I'm amazed that these people that haven't been eating consistently are still able to function for quite a while and still able to work together, where other people, including myself, after a day or so, I'd be like, I'm not willing to experience this discomfort anymore. I'm not willing to experience this level of hunger, to still be nice and friendly to my partner who we're trying to survive in this kind of wilderness setting. And then I think about like, wow, like as humans, we're capable of so many things. Like these people are walking on thorny ground without shoes. And they're eating disgusting beetles because that's all there is. And they're sleeping on rocks because that's it. And it's like they're showing me that willingness is possible even in these extreme states, that they can choose to be there, that willingness really is an attitude. It's like I can experience hunger and exhaustion and loneliness and anger and fear and still choose to engage in this competition. That for me is remarkable. And so when I think about my own willingness around hunger and exposure to the elements and sleeping on bugs, my willingness is low. I'm not going to do it. But I know that it's possible. And I recognize the reason why I'm not going to do it, that's a choice. I'm choosing that. And yet it's possible. I think we limit ourselves so much where it's like, oh, if I experience a little bit of anxiety and I'm in a class or in a staff meeting, I can't raise my hand and ask a question. I can't share my opinion. It's like you can. Anytime you have that heart race where it's like, oh, that'd be so scary to say this or ask this, that is a willingness opportunity to raise your hand and ask and speak. And for me, that's when I practiced over and over and over, and that's gotten a lot more comfortable to me. But when it comes to not eating or sleeping outside without a nice sleeping bag, my willingness is so low. And I recognize that that is a choice, that I could cultivate that if I wanted to.
Just as you were talking, I was like, even in my question, like all those emotions in halt are ones that you can become comfortable with if you choose to be willing. Like if you notice you're hungry, don't just run right to the fridge. Let that sit for a second and understand that, like, okay, I can feel this. I'm not going to die. Clearly, if I put this off for 2 weeks, I'm going to be in a bad spot. But getting comfortable with that ability to notice I'm hungry and then sit with that. That's willingness.
It's powerful. And I like what you said. Like, we've got some basic drives that if we're tired, we can put off that to an extent. But so much sleep deprivation, it could be fatal. Like, you actually need your sleep to survive and function. Same thing with food. Like, we can put that off for a while, but at some point you need to eat or else we will die. Like, our body will stop functioning. Same thing with drinking water. We need to drink at some point. We can delay those to an extent. When I think about sexual urges, we could go a lifetime without having a sexual experience, an orgasm, and be just fine, survive. It's not this, it is a biological drive, but it doesn't need to be satisfied the same way that food and water and sleep does. Those drives actually need to be satisfied for your survival. Sexual urges, they don't. They're strong, they're powerful, but you can have really strong sexual drive and urges without needing to act on those. And I would say doing that for a lifetime would, that's not the goal, because sexuality is connecting and really quite meaningful in healthy relationships. But it might feel really urgent and really life and death, and it isn't. Those sexual urges do not need to be satisfied immediately or in the next day or so or in a month or so. They actually don't have to be. They're different.
That's so interesting. Um, how much of a role do values play in your willingness?
Mm.
And I know I might be jumping ahead on the modules a little bit because we're going to talk about values in a later episode, which I'm super excited for. But at least I noticed in terms of willingness, the things that, like, I very much value exercise. And so my willingness is so high. I can get no sleep and still want to exercise because I feel like there's just a value behind that that overcomes any amount of resistance on the other scale. And so I think that created a lot of problems for me in the struggle with pornography, because it was like, okay, why can I control this? Why can I exercise even like under very specific circumstances that aren't favorable? But over here, it's like I can't even control my urges, like on the best day.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, you talked about two really big things right here. So our mind does this. We can shift back and forth to two different areas, but talk about them as if they're equivalent. And so you talked about sexual urges. That's an internal thing, like a thought, emotion, urge, sensation. Then you talked about exercising. That's an external behavior. Those are completely different things. One's internal world, one's external world. But our mind's like, wait a minute, I was tired and still got up at 5 a.m. and got to the gym and exercised and it was painful and I could do it. Why can't I control a sexual urge? And it's because they're completely different things. One's an outside behavior, something you can engage in like exercise. One's an internal experience, an urge. But also the other part of it is exercise is something you can do. Our mind's really good at doing things. Trying not to view porn is trying to tell yourself, I want to not do something. And our mind can't not do something. It's really good at doing. Like, yeah, you're good at doing exercise. It's just not good at not doing and then turning it internally. Like, I want to control something I can't control and then focus on not doing something, even though that's not how our mind's built. It's like that strategy is just built to fail. But our mind's like, no, they're the same. Should be able to do them both. And they're completely different.
It's that problem solving mind, which creates a lot of problems if you try and solve the wrong problems. That makes. So does it get more complicated because of, oh, I'm just thinking about this for the first time, so I apologize. But like values, I do have values for exercise, but I also do have values around pornography. Like I don't condone it. I don't like the behavior. And so there's this connection of like, I feel very strongly about this. And even though it's innate, the value that I had didn't increase my willingness to the point where I was able to deal with those urges.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So let's actually talk more about values here for a bit, because I'm hearing really clearly your value behind exercise, that exercising is the behavior. The
Right.
value underlying that is good physical health.
Hmm.
I'm not hearing what the value is behind not viewing porn. You got to tell me more here.
Well, that's where, was that language intentional, like not viewing porn?
Well, that's your goal, to not view porn. How is that linked to a value? I see a value clearly guiding your exercise. I
Right.
value physical health and fitness and well being, therefore, I exercise. I'm having a hard time seeing what the value would be behind not viewing porn.
The first thing that came to mind was like, I, in my struggle with this, I thought sexual urges were bad and my value was placed on that.
Yeah.
And I'm now realize things are starting to fit together.
So could that be a value that my value is not doing bad things? Does that feel like a value, just like I value physical health and well-being and fitness? To say I value not doing bad things?
It's not like a, it's not a value. It's just a, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, what is that?
It's like an inverse value because it's not, it's like the absence of a value.
Yeah. This is the problem. There's been so much focus and energy trying to change a behavior or control an urge, and it's not linked to any meaningful value. It's linked to maybe some messages or some fears or some shoulds, some expectations, none of which are values.
Wow. I, and I mean, that's, that's the realization for the whole program, right? Um, I don't know, just hearing that clearly articulated again was powerful. But I think because it's the same thing for most struggles, right? I mean, anxiety's the same way. Like your value around not being anxious is, it's not a value.
It's not a value. I mean, can you value not feeling discomfort? Is that you want to build your life on, I really value not being uncomfortable? Like, I fast forward to the end of your life, do you want that to be your legacy? That, here lies Brian. He spent his whole life trying not to be uncomfortable. And it's like, wow, yeah, that was a life well lived. Or like I
No.
think about me, my struggle is more around like eating and snacking. And the reason why I don't want to snack is because I feel bad about myself when I do. Is that a value? Like I want to not eat as much snacks because I don't want to feel bad about myself. That's not linked to a value.
That makes so much sense. Makes so much sense.
And so this might seem like semantics. I hope it doesn't. I hope this is a meaningful shift. But I think we can have really meaningful values around sexuality and eating. And so in my mind, instead of like, well, I'm not going to eat that 10th cinnamon chocolate gummy bear because I'll feel bad about myself, it's like, actually, I do value my physical health and I do value my energy level and I do value my fitness. And I recognize what I take into my body impacts my ability to exercise and have energy and be alert and be able to go on really cool hikes with my family. And it's like, okay, that gummy bear doesn't really fit in my values anymore. And it's okay to have a gummy bear every once in a while, but to eat the whole bag, even though they're quite tasty, it's quite consistent with my values of I want to be healthy, I want to be active, and what I take into my body contributes to that. And I think we can take that same approach to pornography to say, I want to have relationships that are quite connecting, where I can be open and honest and feel good about my sexual activity and my preferences and have those conversations. You know, viewing pornography on our own may not fit with that. And so if the overarching value is I want connection and I want sexual experiences with a partner that might require some vulnerability and that might be more difficult, but I'm willing to experience that discomfort and learn about ourselves and have conversations. I value connection and I value intimacy, and sexuality is a part of that. Will viewing pornography facilitate that? Probably not. Maybe for some people it might in some situations, but for a lot of people, doing that solitary probably doesn't facilitate that value. And for me, that thinking through what is the value helps really reduce the potency of the gummy bear or the sexual images. Like, does it really fit with what I'm trying to accomplish? And for a lot of people, if the values are not explored, it's like, well, pornography really allows me to have a really accessible, quick sexual experience without any connection or any work or any vulnerability. So it's like, yeah, I got a sexual experience that felt good. But really, our values around sexuality are probably a lot deeper than that. It's not just a sexual encounter. It's probably we want a connecting experience with somebody else. And we want it in a context of a pretty meaningful relationship. So viewing pornography on your own probably isn't going to facilitate that. And for me, that's a really different motivation than I don't want to view porn because it's bad. Or I don't want to eat a gummy bear because it's bad. Those just really aren't enduring, intrinsic reasons to change or guide behavior.
So again, it's flipping the script, because if you look at the behavior like watching pornography and try and figure out the value from that in your struggle, it's not gonna, like, we couldn't do it because it's not linked. But going from your values first, which is the whole Life After Pornography program, is going to create opportunities of discomfort that will then, if you are willing to go through those, create the life that you want to live.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought in values, even though we're going to spend the last couple modules talking about that. I think values is what makes willingness different than anything else. So if I think about traditional cognitive behavioral therapy treatments, if you're feeling anxious, one of the interventions we do is exposure therapy, where it's like, what's the thing that makes you feel anxious? Well, we're going to practice that. And the goal is to help you reduce anxious feelings. That's exposure therapy. And it's effective. It reduces anxiety. It works. How willingness is different is it's exposure therapy, but only to things you really care about. And for me, it's like, oh, like, yeah, I could reduce anxious feelings, but if I can reduce anxious feelings and then engage in things I really care about, that's a really different incentive. There's a lot more motivation to be willing now. And so when I take that mindset to things like eating, my willingness to notice a craving to eat some chocolate, it's much higher, where it's like, yeah, it's okay to crave chocolate. I love chocolate. It is so yummy. That's normal, that's healthy. And I recognize with my health goals right now, I probably don't need to have more chocolate. What I had was fine. And my ability to be willing to experience that craving, so much higher when it's linked to a value. If it's I don't want to feel bad about myself, willingness is a lot lower in my experience.
So if you want high willingness, figure out the value.
You got to. Yep. And I've thought about that professionally. And like these conversations we're having, the Life After Pornography program, the TED Talks, took a lot of willingness, but very, very clear values. If I was not clear with my value that I value promoting mental health, and I value alleviating human suffering, and I value helping vulnerable populations, and I value providing research-based approaches to people in need. If I was not crystal clear on that value, I would not have done a TED Talk. I would not have created this LAP program, because those were scary things. Those were intimidating. Those were super vulnerable. I had to practice willingness a lot. Doing podcast interviews takes a lot of willingness. But I was able to do all that because I care about the reason behind it. And that's why I'm able to raise my hand more when I'm uncomfortable, to share a view or ask an opinion. I value that connection. I value that growth. I value that learning. And I remember the first time I taught a college course, that was terrifying. Like, I'm scripting every word in the lecture. And it's like, but I value teaching people about psychology and mental health and treatments and mindfulness. And it's like, if I really value that, I got to get more comfortable with standing on stage with a microphone and fielding questions and having people challenge me and stumbling over my words. Like, I've got to practice that discomfort because I really care about mental health. And so having that value squarely in my mind, I see these moments of anxiety or discomfort as willingness opportunities. Instead of like, oh, that's too scary, that's too stressful, I'm out. It's like, no, I care about this. I'm going to do it. And willingness is the thing that allows me to live my life consistent with my values. Without willingness, I would not get very far.
I love how much they go hand in hand, because I think like willingness is what helps you unlock your values. Like they can be clearly defined, but willingness allows you to live that life that you want. And that, I can't think of a better way to live life.
That's it.
Like it's uncomfortable, but like you said, if you breach that, there is a life after.
Yeah.
And it's yours. That's so cool.
Yep. There is life after discomfort, and it's life. And I think about my example of the naked and afraid living in the wilderness without food or clothing. That experience is not tied to any value to me. I don't have any value to develop survival skills or prove myself I can do this. There's no value there for me. And so I don't really need to practice that. I don't need to practice not eating for a couple of days or surviving in the cold without clothes and eating critters. I don't need to practice that. I recognize my willingness is low, but that's okay. It's actually not associated with any value currently in my life. That may change because our values change across our lifespan, but currently it's not linked to any value. So I'm curious that other people do it, and I'm curious their motivation and value. But for me, I don't really need to work on that. There's no value for me, but there might be value for others. But around mental health and social justice and vulnerable populations, there's a lot of value for me in those areas. So I'm going to work on getting more comfortable for my discomfort in that because I really care about it. I don't care about 30-degree weather eating critters without clothes. I'm just not going to work on that.
That would be, and I guess later on you do this exercise, but looking at what you already do in terms of the activities in your day and what you, I wouldn't say force yourself to do, but the things you're responsible for, looking at them and seeing to what intent are you participating in these moments in your life. Are you playing with your kids out of willingness to just say you spend time with your kids, or is your value on being a good father
Yep.
or mother? And I feel like it's such a healthy approach to have those values clearly defined, and then it makes willingness more, not easier, but it makes willingness more defined.
Yep.
And you know what you need to do, And I just think that's such a healthy approach, is figuring out what matters to you and being willing to do that.
Yep. You got it. And like, I had a couple personal examples coming up thinking about that. And some of this is just with my kind of religious beliefs and church attendance. There's times I've gone to church because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's the expectation. You should be there. I mean, people that go to church, good people go to church. And it's often with that intention or motivation, I probably didn't get a lot out of that experience. Yeah, I was sitting in the pew, sat in Sunday school, but it was really, I was there because it was something I should do. Then there's other times where it's like, I really value my spiritual development, and I do value my relationship with God and cultivating a better understanding of my Savior. And when I have that mindset, attending church is a completely different experience. It's the same outward behavior, but the attitude and purpose behind it completely transforms it. And I think about the same thing with my work is my work as a psychologist, if I'm honest, is quite difficult. I work through a lot of trauma, a lot of complex, really painful situations. A lot of the things I hear are very unpleasant. And I don't love waking up early to get to work. I would prefer to sleep in. Um, but I can honestly say I don't dread going to work, because work for me is 100% in line with my values. Even though I know I'm going to spend the day hearing some pretty rough stuff and helping people and supporting them, validating them, hearing them, crying with them. For me, that is so consistent with my values that I don't feel like I go to work. I feel like I get to connect with people, improve their mental health. And yeah, it's difficult, it's challenging, but it's so values consistent that I don't get tired of it. I get tired because it's hard work, but man, I can see myself helping in mental health for my entire career and beyond because it fits with my values.
Living a values-based life. That's like, also, I'm really starting to dislike the word should. You mentioned like the things you should be doing, like good people should go to church. Um, that's a strong word, and I think one you can analyze for yourself. Are you doing, if you're having to ask yourself, am I doing the things I should be doing? Is that really like a healthy approach to how you want to live your life?
You're right, Brian,
Um,
because good people shouldn't look at porn.
I'll I dug that hole for too long.
Yep.
But that's exactly the point. It's like that language is powerful, and values puts all that to the side.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you willing to do?
Yep. You're right. It's so important. That should is such a trap. And often it is. Like, good people shouldn't have these sexual urges. Good people shouldn't look at porn. And I think about that isn't the reason why I don't look at pornography in my own personal life. Pornography does not fit my values. It really doesn't. It's not a leisure activity I would choose to engage in. I would much rather play basketball, go play some disc golf, go on a bike ride. That's my leisure. I'd rather watch a movie with my family. Pornography doesn't fit my value for sexual activity, connection with my partner. Pornography doesn't fit any of those values. So it still might be something I'm programmed to enjoy and find appealing, but I really don't have a struggle with porn because in the end, it just doesn't fit any of my values. That's it. And there's no judgment towards myself that, well, you shouldn't want to, or you shouldn't have that interest. It's like, it's pretty normal to have that. It just doesn't happen to fit any of my values. And for other people, it might, where it's like, yeah, that is their entertainment. That is their leisure. It actually might facilitate sexual activity and connection in their relationship. And it's like, that's value consistent. Go for it. For me, currently in my life, it's not value consistent, and it never has. And that's what makes it easy to not struggle with porn. It just doesn't fit one of my values. I've struggled with other things like the chocolate where it's like, oh, that one's a little harder for me. But the more I focus on my values, it's easier to navigate that one too.
It's just such a better way to live life. I like it. I wish yeah, this needs to be taught in school. I mean, it's that, like, you think of values are such an innate part of you. And the fact that I didn't have them clearly defined, or maybe I feel like you have them clearly defined, but you don't spend time with them.
Right.
You don't look at how you want to have your life wrapped around these values, um, and really use your values to bless others' lives. Like it's this blessing of being a human that we have these values. And again, I think some of the best examples of amazing stories are humans that really live with their values, and their willingness is so high that they accomplish so much around that value.
Yep.
And it's inspiring and it's motivating and
Yep.
it makes a difference. And like, to think that I went so long without understanding that.
It's
But
incredible when you put it like that. And I think when you talked about the hunger thing, immediately I thought about Gandhi. And it's like, wow, he lived a value centered life and could go days and probably weeks without eating because it was consistent with his values. And for me, that's what makes us human is our values and what we can accomplish with that. And I think about that part of humanity is incredible. It is so special, so unique. But I think what makes this challenging is our problem solving mind doesn't care about our values. The things that really make us human, that really are enduring, that really make an impact, the things we build a legacy around, there's no problem to solve there. So your mind doesn't care. It's going to latch on to, oh, you don't want to look at porn because that's bad? Okay, let's get to work. Let's devote all of our time and energy and focus in our entire life to solving this problem because that is what our mind's designed to do. It is not as aware and as focused on cultivating our values that really, really define us as a species and really make humans unique. Our mind is not designed for that. It's just like, there's a problem, let's fix it. Values are so much bigger, so much more important.
I love the way you talk about being human, because at least, and I'm not trying to point a finger, but in a very, I think it was the spiritual context for me that, like, the natural man, human, we're fallen, right? Fall of Adam. Like, the things that make us human are our mistakes or our flaws. But I like your approach of, no, the things that make us human are our values.
Yep.
And it's beautiful.
Yep.
And our uniqueness in our bodies. Not what's wrong with our bodies, but what's beautiful about our bodies.
Yeah.
Like, that's being human. I think that's a powerful switch.
Yeah. And I love humans. I think humans are innately good and are capable of doing so much. And then when we get stuck with these shoulds and these problems that our mind gets latched on and these struggles that really are not in line with our values at all, and we lose sight of it. And so we did a nice preview of values here. So I hope people are excited and will want to keep going through the Life After Pornography program, but also hear our walkthrough, because this was an intro. There's a lot more to do with values. And in the end, when we let go of our struggle, it's all about values. It really is. It's not that we got to fix our struggle and then we can live our values. By living our values now, we can let go of a struggle. And it is such a pivot, such a shift. And that is when humanity is beautiful thing to be shared. And I think we're like waiting for that because it's like, I got to get rid of this struggle. I got to control this urge. And then I can be known and connect and live my life. And it's like, no, those things we're struggling with probably don't matter that much. These values do, though.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. And when you can understand the thought of never let your struggles stop you from living your values,
Yeah.
that's when you actually start living. That's when you actually start being human. Like,
Oh, that might be the best definition of willingness. I love that.
thankful for it.
Yeah. Well, this is fun as always. Yeah, we always
Yeah.
like in these chats. There's some metaphors that come up that I've never thought about, heard of before, and the questions you ask make me think about some of these concepts in ways I've never thought. Like I've never maybe thought about the interaction between values and willingness as much as I have in this conversation. So thank you for teaching me and creating this opportunity to go even deeper with these things. And yeah, they're just so deep that we can go with these principles.
I think you can thank willingness, because this is uncomfortable for both of us. But again, when you're willing to breach that discomfort, there's opportunities for growth and connection. So it's practicing what you preach, right?
That's beautiful. Okay, well, I can't wait till next time.
Next week.
We'll see you, Brian.
Later.
Hey, thanks for listening. Please remember to rate and subscribe. I know you might be facing some issues in your life or know someone who is. Issues like anxiety, challenges in dealing with emotions, or other compulsive behaviors like unwanted pornography. And I know it's tough to talk to people about problems. Difficult to stare those obstacles down that we face in life and to really know how to deal with them. It's hard to know what to say and when to say it. And then when that moment you finally reach out to family and friends happens, sometimes it falls flat. I haven't found many programs teaching effective strategies like mindfulness, how to improve relationships, and ways to address unwanted pornography viewing through research-supported principles. So whether you simply want to help with a problem like unwanted pornography, difficulty responding to emotions, or just want to understand the world of someone struggling with porn a little better, head over to LifeAfterPornography.com and get in on the next training. There you'll learn the exact same strategies individuals addicted to pornography used to transform their lives by implementing principles from evidence-based treatment shown effective in research for reducing unwanted pornography viewing. You'll learn the secrets, the myths, the enemies to recovery, and the LAP framework for dealing with unwanted porn viewing that we call WAVE. If that's something that interests you, click the link in the description or just head over to lifeafterpornography.com. I'm Dr. Cameron Staley. See you on the inside.